What's going on, guys? It's MadManPlant. We are here at the Blunt Brunch, the Glitz Glam Event here, and there's a lot of people, and they are fashioned. I already forgot your name, I'm so sorry.
My name's Juliana Whitney.
Juliana Whitney, and we were talking, and you have an MBA, you have helped foster kids.
Yeah.
And you're very passionate about cannabis and business, and so am I. So talk a little bit about the space that you serve and what you've been up to.
I serve really just the business side of cannabis, meaning primarily the technical things like operations, licensing, stuff like that. So I work with investors who want to get into the space if they're good at business in another area but want to invest in this space. I help them do that. Market entry with getting licenses, launching their operations, whether it's cultivation, dispensary, production, social consumption lounge, whatever that may be. And then I also work with operators, both in their operation but in expanding their operations multi-state. So you're a single state operator or just have a couple and you want to expand either via acquisition or new licenses, I help launch those operations and keep the brand consistent across the board so you can be a legitimate scaled company, So those are that's my peeps.
There you go. Now, do you serve all levels, like entry levels, as far as like budgets go? Because not everybody has $6 million for like fees or licensing to just submit and then possibly get rejected. How does that help the small guy and the large guy?
That's a great question. So as you kind of touched on, I used to do a lot with nonprofits. I worked with kids in foster care, largely because I'm very driven by the belief in both purpose and profits. Like those two things can go together.
Okay.
My company, Can Strategy, that's where I work with the investors, the operators, scale companies, launch companies, that kind of thing. As I was doing that though, I'm getting called by smaller people. I don't even like to call them smaller, they're just less funded, let's say. And I was like, well, I don't have, the human capital to just kind of have discount services en masse, but I can build a platform for that, and I can build it with my real knowledge of how to do this thing, teach people how to do it, make it into basically a product kind of like a LegalZoom. So I also have a company called Leaf Sheets, where people can go if you're like a gritty entrepreneur, you want to get started in the space, or you're even a smaller operator and you need your standard operating procedures or logs, or you need to know something about regulations or whatever it is. That's Leaf Sheets is for that person who's has a little bit of they can do it on their own, but also on a budget, and that's what Leaf Sheets is for. So that's how I address serving all levels.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times, and I was talking about this earlier with the Texas hemp wife or the hemp. I'm so bad with names. But
Coalition?
What?
Is it the Texas Hemp Coalition or something like that?
No, it's Kim, and it's the hemp housewife.
Hemp housewife. Okay.
And we were talking about different levels, and even today with some of the forums that we were at, because I go to a lot of the marketing and business side because I'm in both of those spaces, and even with that, there's still a hierarchy to the power players, and I think it needs to be more of a blended mix. The problem I think is, and somebody has to get paid, and I think with cannabis, you have this opportunity to essentially cut everybody out if you make enough money in cannabis, right? So like with the government and everything like this, when it comes to funding, you could be very self-funded in a very short amount of time if you're able to do it through the right channels and the right processes.
Yeah.
And I think, in my opinion, maybe correct me if I'm wrong because you probably have more knowledge on this, is the fact that maybe they want to keep it a certain way as is, and newer markets, newer individuals, people that are more maybe independent, it's more of a risk at certain times than it is a corporation that has all these processes. Am I touching on certain facts that are true?
Yeah, concepts that are real in terms of it is risky if you launch a market and just go, oh, anyone can be in this market, before they've really developed, even the regulators don't even have their procedures developed. And so it's in their interest to have something that's more controlled, because they are a state government that is still doing something that technically is against federal law. So they want it to be as organized as possible. But then you're seeing states like Oklahoma, you're seeing states like New York that are willing to open it up more, and willing to open it up more to people who are not large corporations. It is a risk that they are taking, and they do have a lot more to regulate and a lot more kind of like compliance issues to keep under control, because you're dealing with a different kind of business person and a different level of expertise in the space, you know what I mean, in terms of the businesses that they allow.
Now, with everything that you do and how you help these, what are some main challenges and hurdles that you are instantly able to alleviate for a business or somebody that's willing to invest?
Well, all the time that it takes, but
okay, well,
way beyond that.
That's a good point.
With Can Strategy specifically, it's many things. One is that we have a process in place with Can Strategy of this is how you approach whatever step it is you're doing. This is how you approach it. This is how you approach a state where you don't know the regulations,
yep.
where you are competing against other companies for licenses. We know the things to do to compete on those. We know the business strategies to avoid and the ones that actually work, because there's a lot of strategies that cannabis companies love to try. It's always their number one thought, and they just actually don't work. So why not avoid doing those things? You know what I mean? So it's a lot of stuff like that, just having been in the space and seeing what hasn't worked, and just helping our clients to not go down those paths, not make those mistakes, and let's just go do the things that have worked, and also explore new things that could also work that people either haven't thought of or not a lot of people are doing yet. And so I think just kind of being in the world and having such a sense of the space on a national scale is really the largest value we give to helping our clients just open sooner. There's that like technical piece, but also just be better at it.
What are like some of the most common steps that somebody could avoid that would equal either a harsher like output or a rougher time in processing?
There's a lot of it will have to do with compliance. So there'll be things in terms of, let's say, hiring. One of the easiest ones that I like to kind of talk about is a lot of people will launch cannabis companies and think that, we need to hire people who are cannabis consumers, who are like avid cannabis consumers, right? And don't ask many other questions outside of that have to do with the job. But let's say with a bud tender, cannabis consumption is a benefit if that person is also educated about cannabis and not just consuming it, right? But also if someone is like a barista at Starbucks, knows high volume retail, high cash management, customer service at that scale, dealing with that many orders all the time, all day long, that much pressure, and you can teach them about cannabis, then they're a star employee. So it's little things like that like maybe don't have your first lineup of staff only be hired based on like, do you consume cannabis products? Be more detailed and more targeted, honestly. And remember, it's not just do you know about cannabis, can you sell it? Do you know compliance? Can I teach you compliance so you don't get me fined as a business owner? And that kind of more savvy things.
That's really cool. It's interesting how much regulation there is on cannabis, considering the type of plant and the way it works, when there's so many other things like the FDA and other things are so laxed on. You know, and do you think it's just by design, or do you think that there's real merit for the strictness that you see on some of these regulations on people?
I think that there's merit for it, largely because I believe in regulating consumable goods. I believe that we already have enough problems with, like, let's say food companies poisoning people, not selling products that are like doing people well. And I am all for regulating consumable goods that this could harm someone if you do it incorrectly, not even based on THC, but just based on like cleanliness, on the quality of a facility, on the quality of how a retailer stores cannabis. You can totally change, its kind of makeup in terms of, let's say, your vault's not correct, and now this was fine when it got here, and now it's moldy, and now you sold it, So I believe in the strictness on those parts of the industry. Actually, I really do, and I would like for the cannabis industry to be the example of how consumable goods can be better regulated and better produced and sold, and how you can be better to consumers and keep them in mind in your entire supply chain. The argument that it's being regulated because it's THC, that I don't think that that's really like the issue that needs to be regulated. It's more just like, it's consumable, But I get why they're strict. It's just like a risk. It's to them, the government thinks it's a risk, I guess. I don't know. They think it's heroin or something.
Yeah, don't get me started on that, because on our podcast we talk a lot with addicts, and I definitely sympathize, but then I'm very hard on the situation, because An addict, because I've never been an addict, but an addict, put it perfectly, it is a choice to stay out there.
Yeah.
And it is a choice not to get clean. And from her point of view, I see definitely both sides, you know what I mean? But it kills me how there are methadone labs and or clinics and all these other things that are essentially here to help people continue to destroy their lives. And I always use the argument, but when it comes to a young mom who has cancer, who's very active with her children, who wants to live so bad, and because you don't have insurance, we're gonna let you die.
Yeah.
But this person who is on a sex offender list, he's been arrested like 35 times. Hey, we care about him enough to give him clean needles, clean, substance, and a safe space to inject.
Yeah,
but we couldn't do anything for the mom.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Because we could keep him addicted and on a system where it's continuously pain. And I think that's where kind of going on my conspiracy theory, but with cannabis in general, I think that's why there's such a hard on how do we make this for everybody.
Yeah.
When the opportunity to do so much, like even as a home grower, like my 4x8, which is like about that much space right there.
Yeah.
You could do 3.89 pounds, you know what I mean? So why would I need dispensary? Why would I need other things? And that's why I'm trying to bridge the gap, because obviously not everybody's a home grower. So obviously we need dispensaries. We don't want to put bad things in our body. We don't want to smoke contaminants. And when you look at microcolonies, which I'm sure you're familiar with, they can multiply by the millions within hours, within weeks. So you might look at a situation where, hey, everything looks stable, but 2 weeks later, it's totally gone. So I totally get your point.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how there's a happy median where everybody has a chance to express and be part of the growing process, where we can all have that safe place, where everything's kind of blended, but they have their places. Does that make sense?
I love the question. I don't have the answer exactly, but I do love the question.
Well, you're a great person to start with, but
Yeah, I think that there's a path to that. I don't know it exactly. It's because we also are still operating in a capitalistic society, and so we have to look at how does the society operate outside of cannabis in terms of corporations, and it reacts similarly to, it reacts similarly in terms of wanting to keep people from doing things on their own and wanting it to be done by corporations. But I think that there is some kind of happy medium, kind of like, home, what are those little craft brew kits people do? Maybe eventually we'll get to something like that the government's okay with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just like craft beer in your garage.
Basically, but craft cannabis in your garage, it's all good. It's a little bit, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're rolling.
Well, I'll let you get back to your night. I do want to get you on our 2-hour podcast. It's a virtual podcast.
Okay.
But really go in deep more, because my biggest thing is education.
Okay.
I believe the biggest way to break in the stigma, which Smoke Busters is all about, is education, because it's hard to base or confuse myth with logic.
Yeah.
And when we have enough information, like from your side, through the capitalist side, through all these other areas, whether they agree right now or not, they all play a role into the destigmatization and really the value of what we all recognize.
Yes, I would love to do that. I would love to do another conversation.
Perfect. Guys, we have more podcasts coming your way here at the Blunt Brunch Glitz and Glamour event, and then we're going to be heading over to the Sensi Magazine event as well tonight. We'll see you guys very soon.
Thank you.
That was good.